Hello friends, welcome to the very last keynote of the online symposium Beyond Mind. My name is Saiganesh and today I'm going to be speaking to you on the topic, the healing power of proper breathing. This talk is being pre-recorded. I'm not speaking to you live on September 25th, and so are most of the other talks as part of this conference. So I've had the wonderful opportunity to have watched and listened to most of the other speakers that you earlier heard today. And what an inspiration, what a beautiful day this has been. It is almost intimidating to be following all these great speakers and topics. What we are exploring today is this intersection of science and spirituality, the modern discoveries of science, and how they are echoing the same truths as taught by the ancient yogis and sages of the East. The purpose of all of this, all that we are discussing today, is integration, is to integrate the spiritual understanding, the spiritual aspirations and practices that we have with our practical understanding of the world, the scientific discoveries that have given us an awareness and understanding of both the universe around us but also the human body. How can we bring them together so we can find more effective, newer, better tools to deepen our inner lives, to grow spiritually? So I hope you have been finding this discussion and all the different subjects that we have been exploring today inspiring for you, just as I have. Now, moving to the topic of discussion today, I'm going to be discussing the concept of breath, the idea of breath itself, and how we can work with it. I want to start with a story from Indian mythology, the story of Brahma, the creator Lord. Brahma is God in the aspect of creator, and he manifests all of this universe, all the creatures in it. And in the Hindu view of life, there is this reincarnational cycle, this evolutionary cycle through which all living beings have to go, where they die and they come back again in a newer body, and every time they have to learn more and more lessons until they're finished with all their karma. So Brahma is very busy doing this job. As souls return to the astral plane, he's sending them back again onto the material plane, creating more life. So every time he creates a life, every time we are sent back again through a different mother and a different context, he determines the destiny for that life, what particular karma is about to unfold, how it's going to manifest, and where it's going to take us in our own lives. He defines all of that, and as part of that, Brahma also defines the length of that particular lifetime. Brahma determines the time for which we will live. Now, of course, the way in which time is measured in the astral world is very different from how time is measured on this material plane. That's what we are told. I'm not sure how it works. So he cannot use any common measure of time. He cannot define it in the number of years or months or days. So rather than doing that, he defines the length of each lifetime, each incarnation, in a more fundamental way, in the most fundamental of all units of life itself, which is the breath. So every time a soul incarnates, Brahma defines the length of that lifetime in terms of the number of breaths that particular person will take in that lifetime. So if I am destined to live for 600 million breaths, so I can go doing that happily, but 600 millionth first breath, however you say that, will be my last breath when I'll have to leave this body. Now, of course, these stories are deeply symbolical and there's a lot of allegories, so I'm not going to go into greater depth exploring them. But one of the most obvious teachings of this story, or the obvious interpretations, is that the slower we breathe, the lesser we breathe, the longer we live. That's in essence what the story is teaching us. Now, putting that aside, we come to another interesting revelation that science has given us in these last few decades. We look at this study called the Framingham study. I discovered this only very recently when I was reading a book. This was in the 1980s. This study has been going on for many, many decades, where scientists have been studying heart health and the correlation between the health of somebody's heart and their life and the quality of their life and such. And as part of this life, they were studying thousands of subjects. I think this was done over 2 decades, and they were collecting a lot of data and crunching the numbers and looking at patterns. And this is what the scientists concluded in the 80s based on all the data that they had gathered, which is more than somebody's genetics, their predisposition for certain diseases, even heart health or any other factor in their life. what affected their longevity, what defined the length of their lifetime more than anything was their lung capacity. The capacity of their lungs determined how healthy and how long they could live. That is such an interesting correlation to the myth of Brahma from the Hindu scriptures, which was the same truth that the yogis were implying as well. Now, breath is so fundamental to life itself that it is not surprising that our lungs, our breath, our respiration is so closely connected to our overall health. Now, there is the Sanskrit word prana, which is very commonly used, and I'm sure which most of you have heard of. This word is often translated in many different ways, sometimes as life force, as breath, as the flow of air, as life current, life itself. It is interesting to note that the word for life, or the essence of life itself, is the same as the process of breathing, because the yogis understood that this process of breathing, of air being inhaled through our nostrils, of air filling our lungs and being processed there, and then we exhaling, this process of respiration itself, this is not merely a physiological process. In fact, they always considered it a reflection of something subtler. This is where we enter into the metaphysics of it, where we discuss the astral body. We are, of course, not going to go into greater detail into these subjects. You can find a lot of resources online. The yogis talk about the subtler astral plane and the astral body, where we are made of many, many nadis, and three fundamental nadis across our astral spine. These three nadis are called Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. And life force, prana, is flowing in this astral spine. And what the physical breath is a mere reflection of this flow of prana. The physical breath is not causative. It is in fact the result of something else that is much subtler and deeper. And the definition of life itself is the flow of this prana. Now, this prana is not flowing unimpeded, because throughout the stretch of that astral spine, there are all these plexus, there are all these nodes where we store impressions. We store all our fears, our regrets, our hopes, everything that limits us, all the things that we want, all the things we like and don't like, all the belief systems that we hold on to so strongly, all the limiting beliefs, our own personality, all of this is impeding the flow, the free flow of that prana in the astral spine. And so it goes without saying that these movements and this will be reflected in the physical breath as well, that the physical breath will reflect that same flow. That is why the breath is such a reflection and an indicator for subtler than physiological states. Our emotional states, our deep mental states can often be reflected in the way we breathe. And in my own role as somebody who shares the teachings of yogic philosophy and meditation, we would welcome students often to feel the flow of prana throughout the entire stretch of your spine. That's how the teachings of yoga tell us to do it, because this prana flows from the bottom, from the coccygeal plexus, base of the spine, till the spiritual eye, and we want to imagine that flow as we are tuning into it. And students would often ask this question, what do you mean by feel the energy? What is it that we are feeling? What is this energy that you're talking about? Is that a physical sensation? Do I actually note something in my own spine? Is there something that's happening in my physical body? Now, those are hard questions to answer, because these are subtler ideas and concepts that we are referring to, and not all of them, they might sometimes, but most often they don't always reflect physiologically in the physical body. So it is something that we need to tune into. And this is where the idea of proper breathing itself comes, because when we are breathing properly, when we are able to relax our bodies, when our diaphragms are relaxed and we are taking a full breath as the yogis describe it, then we are actually engaging muscles throughout the entire stretch of the spine, starting from the coccyx till the base of the neck. All these muscles are engaged with each breath. So in fact, it is not a stretch when we are filling our belly with air. That's how we describe when we practice yoga or meditation. One might wonder, isn't air entering through my nostrils and filling my lungs? How do I get air into my stomach? Not literally, but it refers to that flow of energy and also the musculature, how the physical body moves that breath, how we feel it. And the same is true with all that we hold throughout our spine, all these different nerve plexus where we hold impressions, these are holding us back. So when we are not properly breathing, when our energies are stuck, when we are in emotional states, when we are stressed, when we are anxious, when we are in a hurry, when we are depressed, or whatever it is that we are going through, any negative emotional state, the first thing you will notice is that you cannot feel the breath throughout the entire stretch of the spine. The breath gets disconnected from that flow of energy. Either our diaphragms are constricted, we are breathing more from this part, we cannot really tune into that relaxed posture where we can go deep into our own body. So we lose that awareness, because you see, the breath is not just a reflection, it is also the handle. It is the handle through which we access these subtler realities, and we can start shifting them, because the physical body and the physical breath are often much easier to work with than the subtler realities. We need to access them through the physical. So the first thing that happens when we are in negative emotional states is that we lose that handle, because we can no longer work with our breath. That's when we start feeling constriction in our bodies, and our breath itself becomes something that is confined to this region, and we are no longer relaxing our diaphragm and things like that. Now, the idea of proper breathing is not just restricted to being able to feel the breath throughout the entire stretch of the spine. Of course, it's a great start, but there are many important things that one can consider. I'll make a small list here, but of course, it's not a limited or a conclusive list. These are all great places to start. The first one, of course, is being able to feel the diaphragm, the freedom of the diaphragm muscle to move as we breathe, the gentle movement of the belly as we inhale and exhale. The unconstricted movement of the diaphragm is an important indicator of proper breathing. Very little movement or no movement at all in the chest area as we breathe. Making sure that we are breathing only through our nostrils, through our nose, and there is no breath or air that is taken in through the mouth. Making sure there is a healthy balance between the right and the left nostril, because again, there are subtle yogic teachings of how they relate to the flow of energies in the nadis and how they affect the balance in our own nervous system. Making sure that we are exhaling completely, that all the carbon dioxide from the body is exhaled out with each breath, that we can inhale the fresh air and only as much as we need. All of these are important aspects of proper breathing. As I'm speaking, I'm realizing even the word proper breathing is not as good as the word natural breathing, because we are not talking about a set of rules or guidelines or exercises that somebody follows in order to become happier and healthier. What we are talking about is allowing ourselves, our bodies, to return to a more natural state, of breathing, in order to balance some of the imbalances that we ourselves have created in our bodies and minds, because it is in that place that we can find that healing of the body, healing of our emotions, healing of our mind. All of that can happen through that breath, because as we have been discussing, this breath is also that flow of prana that is being impeded by all these different limitations, mental, emotional, spiritual, that are holding us back from being able to live our own true potential. I was recently reading a book on breath by this author named James Nestor. In fact, it is the book that I can say certainly inspired this talk for the most part. I would highly recommend it. You can easily find it online. And in this book, this author shares the story of a choral conductor from North Carolina. This is from the 1940s. His name was Carl Stroh, I think. And Mr. Stroh had realized the power of breath and of how relaxing the diaphragm and training our bodies to naturally breathe can heal many, many physical conditions. There are a lot of stories he talks about and he mentions in that book. And one of these interesting stories is how Stroh would go to hospitals to patients that were suffering from an extreme condition called emphysema. This is where the lung tissues have deteriorated so much that the body really cannot absorb much oxygen. It cannot absorb oxygen effectively. And Stroh would just touch the bodies of these patients. None of the doctors could understand what he was doing, because doctors had a very different view of what this disease was or how it had to be treated. But Stroh understood that he needed to maneuver the muscles. He needed to work with their bodies, and nobody clearly knows what he did, how he did that. It was almost a secret. But he would allow the patients, he would touch them and massage them in certain ways that their diaphragm would be activated, that now they could start breathing. And even cases that were completely dismissed by physicians, people that couldn't breathe at all, that were constantly struggling, that had to be put on oxygen, even they started healing. And this was a medical miracle even in those days. There's so many more stories that the book talks about. All of this leading us to this one point, that when we can train our body, when we can learn to relax our core, to relax our diaphragm, to let the body return to its natural state of breathing, because it is where we hold that tension. All that is affecting our minds immediately descends into the body. As I was saying, when we are not in a calm state, when we are not in that state where we can actually feel that flow of energy, the breath is constricted to this region. Another very helpful practice, especially for times when the body is too restless, when you find it hard to calm the body, or especially for those of you that meditate, for those times when the body is too restless for us to be able to sit long enough in meditation practice, to experience the deep stillness in meditation, the easiest thing to try is equal count breathing. Any form of counted breathing, that for that matter, but equal count breathing, because what it does, it helps our body return to a natural state of balance. It helps, again, emphasize that natural way for the breath to flow. And you could also extend the exhale. It produces what a researcher famously called the relaxation response. You could do the same counted breathing, but if you were to extend the count of the exhales, that can also have a specific effect in being able to calm the body even more. These are all tools that are helpful for us to have in our own toolkit, to constantly be aware of, to be conscious of where our breath is, how relaxed our diaphragm is, and to be able to pull one of those out in order for us to move in that direction of healing, of returning to that state of balance. The last technique that I'll share, again one that maybe most of you are familiar with, is the alternate nostril breathing, because the left and the right nostril themselves, the nose is this intricate, subtle system that is keeping the body in balance. It regulates body temperature, pressure, and so many other subtler things. People were underestimating the value of nose as an organ itself until the last few decades. Now there is so much research that talks about how the nose performs many critical functions in the body, and the right and the left nostril almost balance each other. They complement each other. Again, the yogis often talk about it as relating to the nadis, the subtler nadis that I was referring to. But the simplest practice in that regard is to try alternate nostril breathing, which is also a great technique to restore balance in the body. And for those times when you want to energize the body and when you want to return to that state of active, dynamic presence, then breathing simply through the right nostril is the way to trigger that part of your brain, that part of the nervous system that pushes you in that direction. And breathing through the left does the opposite. So for those times when you feel you're already high-strung, but you want to bring yourself into a state of calmness, into a state of deeper relaxation, you could try breathing simply just through the left nostril. So I know I'm sharing a lot, and these are all various techniques which you perhaps were already familiar with, but are helpful for us to understand in terms of the state of balance that we are seeking, and this idea of always being aware of what proper breathing is, how relaxed our body is. So I think I'll end here. I think I've shared enough. Following me, you will have Keshava. These are teachings that are much better demonstrated and practiced rather than just talking about. I'm realizing as I'm sharing more and more about breath and breathing techniques, they're much better understood when somebody is guiding you through them. So now we will have an experiential session led by Keshava on how we can relax the body, how we can try and experience the benefits of some of these pranayama techniques. So I hope you found this helpful. Certainly feel free to write any thoughts or comments you have. Until I see you on a different platform on a different topic, God bless you.